Welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar entitled China's Credit Card Industry 2012, What's Next? Brought to you by Kapronasia. My name is Paul Robinson. I'll be acting as the webinar moderator. China has traditionally been a very cash-based society. When credit cards first started to appear on the market, uptake was slow and banks struggled to find a business model that worked. Several years later, the market has changed dramatically. Now, and it is an increasingly popular payment tool, the credit card has played a pivotal role in the stimulation of domestic consumption, with the total card circulation exceeding 280 million and transaction value accounting for 42% of China's total retail spending. Now, in this informative 45-minute webinar, we'll explore some of the most important questions in the credit card market today. You'll also learn how the market developed so quickly, its size, and its future. We'll also discuss the customer behavior driving the market and how banks will need to act in future. Plus, you'll hear about the benefits vendors can gain from this industry and the potential opportunities. Now, I do need to inform you that today's session is being recorded and is run in listen-only mode. However, we really do want to encourage feedback and questions from you throughout the webinar. To facilitate this discussion, we'll use two features of the software. The attendee viewer is the first part, and then that's got a window where you'll see the presentation. And I'd recommend maximizing that now so you can see that in full screen. The second part of the second feature we have of the webinar today is the control panel where you can interact with us. This control panel can be opened and closed by clicking on the arrow button on the Grab tab. And in that control panel, you're welcome to submit questions and comments to our presenters. We'll be answering as many of these as possible throughout the webinar, and at the conclusion as well. Now, our presenter today is Ken Ding. Ken is one of Kapronasia's senior analysts, and Ken's joining us from Kapronasia's head office in Shanghai, where as one of Asia's leading providers of independent research, custom consulting, and advisory services that focus on the financial industry and financial technology, Kapronasia helps clients understand and navigate the challenges they face in this region with a rapidly changing business, operational, and technological environment. Now, with all that said, let's get on with the presentation today. Ken, go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Thanks, everyone, for joining the webinar today. As Paul just mentioned, today I want to start off and give you some of the key insights from our credit card market report instead of going through every details. And I will send out the information about how to get the full copy of the report later. So the title of the report is China's Credit Card Market, that was produced by Kapronasia. Same as other research Kapronasia does, the methodology we used was based on the secondary research, which included the internal knowledge government reports. And then we also spoke to a number of people from the banks and the vendors to find out what they think as our primary research. And the purpose of this credit card report is to identify the key issues and trends of China's credit card market. And we also add our suggestions for different patterns. And so hope all this information will help you to approach this market. So today's presentation is divided into 5 sections. And let's move on to China's payment environment first. So here are some important definitions we will use in this credit card report. And you can see in China, the Bankcard industry is very large, and it includes 2 parts, the debit card market and the credit card market. And in China, because a lot of card holders will not use their credit card after receiving it, so the rate of active credit card is very important in our report. And the last one is about the non-performance rate. Actually, in China, the 180 days delinquency rate, also called this the non-performance rate, and it equals to the ratio of 118 days delinquency to the ending of the outstanding balance of that year. So China's non-cash payment instruments in China mainly include 3 parts. One is the bank card, the other 2 is the checks and the remittance. And according to this chart, in 2011, a total of 34 billion payment transactions was handled through non-cash payment instruments with a year-on-year growth rate of the 22%. And we can also find that among these three different kinds of payment instruments, the bank card contributed to over 90% of their payment volume and are increasingly widely used in China, whereas the other two instruments show a gradual decline in China. So let's focus on the China's bank card industry. As a non-cash payment instrument, the bank card in China has become the most popular one in the retail consumption. Its issuing volume keep a sharp increase over the span of 2006 and 2011. So far, there are over 170 domestic bank card issuers, and the circulation of the bank card, you can see from the chart, is exceeding 3 billion last year. And the fast increase of the circulation of bank card in China was mainly because the commercial banks were giving their priority to the retail banking, and their bank cards were more profitable than other payment instruments. Therefore, commercial banks continuously invest more and more money in the bank card issuing. However, we also found that compared with 6 in USA, the number of bank card per person in China was only 2 in 2011, which means this market still has greater potential in the future. And with the proliferation of bank cards and the expansion of bank card acceptance environment, the cardholders in China has changed their behavior, which means more and more people are like to complete their payment just by swiping their bank card. So the bank card's consumption shows a tremendous upward trend, you can see from this chart. And at the end of last year, the total bank card consumption contributed to about 40% of the total retail consumption in China. And more interestingly, in China, most of the bank card transactions happened between different banks, which when this kind of transaction happens, the China UnionPay will involve in this transaction and charge a certain amount of transaction fee from both issuer banks and acquirer banks. So the boom of China payment industry, especially the bank card industry, lays a solid foundation for the development of credit card market, which is more interesting. So let's start to talk about the credit card market. The first credit card in China was introduced in 1985, but the market did not grow very quickly until 2002 when China UnionPay was established. And actually, the China UnionPay was appointed by the People Bank of China and was funded by over 80 financial institutions in 2002. Actually, it's China's only domestic retail payment switch and dominates the domestic bank card, including debit and credit card industry. After 2002, China's credit card market started to surge and went abroad under the China UnionPay's push. In 2010, the China UnionPay launched its online interbank clear system, which promotes the proliferation of credit card payment online. As a government organization, the China UnionPay has a considerable influence in China's retail payment industry. First, it can act as an industry regulator to monitor the industry, promote the bank card payment standards. Second, in addition to operating the retail payment switch platform, the China UnionPay also competes with third-party companies in both online payment and offline acquiring business with the help of its subsidiaries. So it can also accumulate an enormous quantity of merchants in China. In China, the growth rate of credit card is higher than that of debit card. At the end of 2011, 285 million credit cards was issued in China, accounting for 10% of the total bank cards. However, from this chart, we find that the growth rate of credit card has been decreasing gradually. because the commercial banks are now giving their priority to the quality of the issuing credit card instead of the quantity, which means the banks start to pay more attention on how to earn profits from the credit card rather than just issuing more and more credit cards. The number of active credit cards increased 16% to 500 to 150 million in 2011, represent about 50% of the total credit card in circulation. And driven by the high consumption of demand in China, we expect that the number of active credit cards will continue a steady growth in the future, but the rate of active credit card was still very low. And actually, we will compare this data with U.S. market in the following slides. And we think that the low rate of active credit card is mainly due to the banks focus on the large quantity of credit cards. In order to increase their circulation of credit card, the banks provide many free gifts, so that many people want to get the cards just for these free gifts. And then, after they receive their gifts, they will never use their credit card again. Driven by the proliferation of Bankcard, the Bankcard acceptance network expands market, not only covering the developed regions and the large cities in China, but also expand to the undeveloped areas in central and western China, such as medium and small-sized city and even rural areas. Also, the international acceptance network expanded by China UnionPay also improved significantly, provide wide channels for the credit card issuers in China to expand their services abroad. And we have already covered more data about this in the final report. As a convenient payment tool in China, the credit card is becoming increasingly popular in China. Both its transaction volume and value show a steady upward trend. And more importantly, the consumption habit has changed significantly in China. The credit card has become the primary payment tool for most households in China. From this chart, you can see that at the end of 2011, the total consumption value of credit card grew to $650 billion. The next part I want to share is about the customer behavior in China and the market share. From this interesting chart, we can see that the Chinese credit card market still falls behind with U.S. markets in terms of their credit card circulation, penetration, transaction, and the active credit card rate. You can see from the chart, the inactive credit card rate in China is much higher than U.S. Also, on average, although Chinese consumers make less money, but they spend more money per transaction and carry a large balance than the U.S. cardholders. We made this chart want to illustrate that in China, the value per transaction of credit card is very high. As the previous slide shows that you can see the data is as 3 times as U.S. data. And we think that this is because Chinese people still prefer to only use credit card for large value transactions. And this is even promoted by banks who provide the promotion plans for large value purchase, such as use credit cards to buy cars, buy tours, and even buy some computers. In the future, we expect that this trend will still increase for the next few years and peaking in around 2015. Then, as the market is becoming mature, and we believe that a smaller value transaction will gain popularity, driven by the improved bank acceptance, promotion by both banks and merchants, and rising consumer confidence. Regarding the market share in China, the big five state-owned banks still obtain the largest customer resources, contribute to over 60% of the total credit card in circulation. The largest commercial banks, the ICBC, still held their first place spot in China's credit card market, with about 17.1 million credit cards in circulation. And challenges for the larger banks is not issuing credit card right now, but making profits from the existing credit cards. But for the small banks, they are still struggling with gaining more customers, so they just speed up to issue more credit cards in the future. Now let's move on to the credit cards and risk control and the IT system. At the end of 2011, the outstanding credit card balance in China was about $130 million, rising 80% over last year. The large increase was due to the widespread use of credit card in China, and the 180-day delinquency rate, which is also the non-performance rate, slipped to 1.4% last year. But although this rate continued to dip after the financial crisis in 2009, but the total amount of the non-performance law is still increased and surged by 50% last year. So I think the banks should be alarmed by this trend. And the credit card fraud is still a biggest problem for the banks in China. Last year, the total loss due to the fraud was $24 million, rising by 26%. The authorities issued the commercial bank's credit card business regulation on last January, imposing a higher standard for the fraud management in China. And so the commercial banks are required to build a comprehensive credit card risk management system for prior, such as, for example, the prior identification, the quick assessment, the real-time monitors, and the effective control of the risk. So regarding the current IT situation, for the large commercial banks, the credit card system are dominated by some international card integrators or vendors. For joint stock commercial banks, the situation is mixed. Some large players are using their international credit card system, whereas the smaller players are outsourcing credit card system to China Union Data, which is the China Union Pay's subsidiary. So do the majority of city commercial banks and rural banks. And in the future, we expect the banks face more IT challenges. First, they require a higher standard for the card system. And second, because the credit card business is not profitable so far, especially for small and medium banks. So continuous investment in the system is difficult to justify. And finally, we believe the perfect localization is essential when the banks want to choose foreign vendors. In China, the IT decision-making process may be slightly varies from the Western practice, which means sometimes the vendor search often happens before the project is even approved. And according to our primary research, we found that the final purchase decision are often dependent on the relationship between the banks and the vendors. So for foreign vendors, it's better to have a local partners who has a very strong relationship with the local banks. At last, we will provide some expectations on China's credit card market. First, the Chinese authorities pledged to reform the financial market during the 5 years plan period, which started in 2011 and will last through 2015. And the innovation is a key part of this change. So Chinese banks are clearly willing to spend on the IT development to support their business innovation. So we expect the overall IT spend in China, the banking industry will continue to increase and reach about $15 billion at the end of this year. Second, we expect that China's further stimulation of the domestic consumption will continue to drive the credit card issuance, and the total circulation of credit card will exceed 500 billion by the end of 2016. And the domestic spending on the credit card will also continue to grow strongly to about $4 trillion in that year. Third, we want to talk about China's EMV migration, which will also benefit the development of the whole bank card payment industry. Last year was the first time that the China's authority listed the proliferation of financial IC card as a key task in China's financial industry, and also set a very specific migration schedule you can see from this timeline on the slides. And according to People's Bank of China's specific EMV migration plan, the commercial banks in China still have a lot of work to do. We estimate that by the end of 2015, the total number of financial IC cards in circulation will have reached 900 million. The people banks of China's EMV migration in China involve Bankcards and the terminal production, as well as the software to support the system. This means that there are tremendous opportunities for nearly all of the players along the value chain. During the 5 years plan, we estimate that China's commercial banks will purchase at least 20 billion RMB financial IC cards. And we also believe that China's terminal markets, such as the POS terminal and ATM terminals, will keep a stronger growth during the 5 years plan. Apart from investing in hardwares, banks need to adjust their card issuance systems and the transaction system to their financial IC cards. So we believe that the system vendor, especially the foreign vendors, will have a lot of opportunities in China. In order to make more profits in China's credit card market, an issuer should encourage cardholders to use their credit cards more frequently by offering more and more attractive services. Here are some examples. The banks can integrate the different payment means together so that the credit cards are can not only use on the POS terminals, but can also use for online payment, which is very popular in China now, and also the mobile payment, and even for fixed line payment, which means the telephone payment or TV payment. Also, the more value-added services will be provided by banks. For instance, they can provide some market research or customer behavior research to the merchants, and they can also offering various loyalty programs and VIP services to retain their cardholders. Actually in China, the loyalty programs of the credit card are very popular in China. Finally, we think the risk control is always one of the most important things for banks. With the authorities paying more attention on the risk control, banks still face a lot of challenges on their credit card risk control, which also means they face a lot of challenges and they need a more sophisticated system. And we believe that the foreign vendors, which their products are much better than local vendors, they will have more opportunities in the future. Okay, these are all the contents we shared today, and thanks again for joining the webinar. And in the next couple of days, we will issue the final report, and please feel free to contact us, and let's move on the Q&A section. Paul, hand over to you.
Okay, thanks very much, Ken. Thanks. That was a great presentation. There was a lot of really good information in there. Now, as I mentioned when we first started the webinar here today, we're going to go into the Q&A section. So if you have questions for us, we've got some people online and we'll go ahead and answer those as well. All you need to do is click on the questions pane or the chat pane there in the GoToWebinar software, and we'll be able to see your question pop up. But in the meantime, while you're adding those in, there have been a couple that have come in already, Ken, from some folks on the line. This one comes from James, the first one, and it says, the essential monopoly of UnionPay appears to have left Visa, Discover, MasterCard, and Amex out in the cold in terms of processing local RMB transactions. Do you see that monopoly changing in the future?
Yes, yeah, actually it's a very sensitive topic in China's payment industry. In China, the China UnionPay is the only organization to control the RMB transaction process, and it dominates the market. But right now, the China's government wants to reform its financial market, making the local market more international. So we believe that opening the RMB transaction process is an essential step. However, the priority of China's authority now is still keep the whole industry stable and safe. So therefore, we believe in a short time, at least 5 or 6 years, we don't think the market will change.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Okay, there's a couple more that have come in. So the next one's from Victor, and it says there's obviously quite a lot of debit card spending in China as well, and I know that was covered in one of the previous Kapronasia webinars we've done in one of the reports as well. But the question is, will credit card spending ever surpass debit card spending in China?
Yeah, actually in China, because the total number of credit card only make up 10% of the total bank cards, and although the growth rate of credit card spending is larger than debit card, but in the future the debit card spending will still be the majority of the total spending. And actually this is a very good question. We already cover this data in our final report.
Okay, thank you for that. And I know you mentioned that the next question's about loyalty programs, but I know in your presentation you mentioned that quite often people there in China are getting the credit cards and taking the gift and then not using the credit card again. But the question here from John came in and it said, how important are loyalty programs? The loyalty program is very important tool for banks to attract and retain their customer holder, just as I mentioned during the presentation. The more important is they need to figure out how to earn profit from the credit card. So they want to push the cardholder to use their credit card more frequently. In China, actually, almost every bank launch various loyalty programs, because the more frequently cardholder use their card, the more the loyalty points they can get, so that they can use their loyalty points to exchange some gifts, such as a watch, a mobile phone, and even air tickets. So actually the loyalty program is a good way to motivate the card holders to use their cards. Okay, that's good information to know. All right. The next question comes from Candy. There's still a couple coming in here, so I'm just trying to read through this one. So Candy asks, for the smaller banks, it must be difficult to compete as they lack the capital base of the large ex-state-owned enterprise banks. What are they trying to do to increase their market share? So that was a bit at the end. So really, what are they trying to do?
Okay, that's a good question. And first, we think that for smaller banks, they will speed up to issue more credit cards. And because only when the number of credit cards is big enough, the issuing banks can earn profits. And second, we believe that the large banks occupy a very dominant market share in some top-tier cities. So the small banks tend to focus more on the second-tier cities and even rural areas. I think it's very normal, especially for some local commercial banks which has already a very strong network in their local marketplace.
Okay, perfect. All right, another question here says, is there any difference between international EMV and China EMV like there is for international 3G and China 3G?
Yeah, like the China's 3G, the People Banks of China's EMV is I mentioned in the slides is slightly different from the international EMV because the IC card standard is actually based on the People Bank of China's own standard. So it's called as the PBOC 2.0, which is very similar to the international EMV. But because this difference, it means that every smart card system must receive the PBOC 2.0's certification after passing a series of strict tests, such as the electronical reliability and some security command and transaction testing.
All right, great. Now let's see. This one's maybe a little bit more difficult. We just got one towards the end. It's how do the credit card fees or the fees compare with Western fees? So I know that there's you know, you may not have done all the research into that one. Is that something you're able to answer at this point in time, or is that something we might be able to get back the asker of that question at a later time?
Sorry, you mean the credit card fee?
Yeah, is there a fee? I guess the question more is along the lines: is there a fee for holding the credit card in China?
Yeah,
like there is in the US. That's okay. It was a
Yeah, in China, of course there is a credit card fee for the card holders, but normally, in order to acquire more customers, to issue more cards, the banks will promote some promotions. For example, if the card holders can use over 5 times during 1 year, so they needn't pay for the credit card fee. So actually, according to our primary research, most of the card holders will not pay this kind of credit card fee in China because they will use much more than 5 times.
They use more than the 5. Okay, no, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good way to get the customer to use them all, so that's perfect.
Yeah,
sure. It is a move that they definitely use in the Western organizations or Western countries too. Okay, so there aren't any more questions coming in, so just while I'll do the wrap up here, just remind you, if you've got more questions, send them in. In the meantime, we've been busy answering a lot of the questions behind the scenes as well, so if we didn't get back to you individually, so if we didn't get back to you today, we'll get back to you individually as well once the webinar is over. Now, Ken mentioned in a couple of slides earlier that the discussion today is based on Kapronasia's upcoming report on the China credit card payment industry. And in that report, it's going to offer a great critical insight into the payment industry, and that's actually going to be available as part of Kapronasia's subscription service. Now, if you haven't already registered for this service, we'll also be providing a link to that in the email you'll shortly receive, thanking you for your attendance at today's presentation. And in that link will also be, in that email, there'll also be a link to the recording we've been making of today's presentation. So that way, if you've missed something in here or you want to review something that's gone on, listen at your own pace, you'll be able to do that as well. And once again, Kapronasia really appreciates your time. We hope you found today's webinar and the information provided informative and also very helpful too. With that said, I'd like to thank Ken for his presentation. This concludes our webinar today. Thank you very much for joining us.